Hi everyone, Josh Moody here. I just wanted to check in visually here in the middle of this crazy, unexpected week. I'm not sure what life is like for you this week, but if you had told me, even as recent as about 10 days ago, that our kids would be out of school for a couple weeks and we would be canceling services and events in this season leading up to Easter, I would have said not a chance. But here we are in very strange times. I know what it feels like for most of us. It feels like life is never going to get back to normal. How can this possibly end well for our economy, for our kids, for our schools, for our community, for our church? But I want to just remind you of a couple of things. One, just thinking back in recent history, and I would venture a guess that this is true in long term history as well. But just thinking of the last couple of decades, it seems that there's something significant that happens every 8 or 10 years in our region or our country that really is out of the norm and feels like, gosh, the world will never be the same. And yet things end up happening that are really good as a result of it. I think back to 9/11, 2001. None of us wanted to see that happen. And I remember for the first few days and even weeks, it seemed like, our world is changed forever. And it has in many ways. It has changed. But it felt like life will never resume. The good things about life will never resume. And yet they do. We bounce back. We learn new ways of living and adapting. And God does wonderful new things out of that very painful event. Or I think back to Hurricane Sandy here on Long Island in 2012. We were felt like we were in a war zone there for a couple of weeks. No power, lines for a mile long at the gas station just to fill up your car. People panic buying with all the gas cans they can carry. It just felt like life will never be the same again. How can we possibly go on? And we do, and God births new things out of that He ends up using in the long term. And I'm confident that's going to be the same in this case as well. I don't know how long it's going to be, but I know that God is going to work in us and through us during this time and as a result of it. In fact, I remember how that happened when the church was brand new. After Jesus' resurrection in the book of Acts, we read about how thousands of people are coming to know Jesus. They're believing the good news of what He's done for them. They're following Him. The church is just growing, multiplying quickly, without a building of its own. People meeting on their own in homes to share food, to study the scriptures together. The Holy Spirit is moving. There's a young, dynamic leader named Stephen. And suddenly, at the end of Acts chapter 7, we read that Stephen was killed. It wasn't expected. Jesus had said hard times would come, but nobody expected it to happen now and not to him. And the next thing we read about in the beginning of Acts chapter 8 is this. On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. But Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women and put them in prison. It was a moment when it felt like Jesus' unstoppable mission had been stopped. They had killed Stephen. The church was being persecuted. Christians were being scattered. Suddenly, all these good things that were happening in Jerusalem, the growth of the church, it was going to have to stop. It seemed terrible. And yet what ended up happening is that the good news got to Samaria, a place where Jesus had said that it would get, and nobody knew how it was going to get there. And it ended up pushing the good news out, even to Gentile territory, in fulfillment of what Jesus had promised. And the church continued to grow, and Jesus continued to change lives. And it all started with something that nobody wanted or asked for or expected that seemed like the worst thing possible. I say that because here we are, some of us may be missing work, a lot of people missing school, groceries hard to come by, church gatherings canceled, and it feels like life will never be the same. How can we recover? And yet I know that God, in His sovereign wisdom, is going to use this situation to do some wonderful things in our lives individually, in our communities, and in our church. So let's keep our head up. Let's expect God to be on the move. Let's be looking for the opportunities he gives us in these days to be on mission with him, knowing that we will be together again as a church and God will be glorified. Hang in there.